All right, YouTube, you may have seen the whole Trigglypuff thing. What happened is that at UMass Amherst, there was Milo, of course. He's gay, like a gay conservative, which freaks a lot of people out. He was giving a speech. Essentially, anything that doesn't fit into the social Marxist narrative of the most severe social justice warriors. If you claim, for example, that borders should exist at all, that nations should exist at all, that there's any relevancy whatsoever to the biological concept of race, even the more liberal aspects thereof, you are considered to be using, in the average social justice warrior crowd, you're going to be considered as using hate speech. Now, I think a lot of people, they look at colleges and they think of them as hegemonic. Like, I went to UVM, Groovy UV. It's like weed smoking 101. Full of hippies, and by hippies I mean a bunch of people from like the Pacific Northwest who have trust funds who come to get like white froze and dreadlocks in their hair and skateboard to class and then pretend to be like homegrown Birkenstock wearing Vermont hippie because that's the image that they want to perpetuate for themselves. They eat Ben and Jerry's while they're stoned and stuff. We can't allow ourselves to conflate the opinions, the beliefs of a handful of people who are fanatics, let's face it. I mean, they're just totally fucking out there, with the entire crowd of people who are going to college. Because, I mean, there are people going there for, like, architecture, engineering, STEM, and so forth, that are not necessarily part of that crowd. I studied anthropology. I was never a social justice warrior, even back when I considered myself to be a liberal. I was never into that. I was against censorship that includes censorship of the right wing. I never called for censorship of like evangelicals, even though obviously I'm a pagan. At the time I was a Satanist. So there's a big difference. There are different groups of people within a college campus. Clearly, though, this specific individual who's part of the body positive movement, which means essentially I'm obese, I'm okay with being obese, and everybody else should just shut the fuck up about me being obese. Oh, it's perfectly healthy to be like 600 pounds. That's essentially what it boils down to. Felt very triggered by Milo's speech, felt very triggered by the whole proceedings, and apparently is dumb enough to conflate free speech with denying others free speech. And we've seen this consistently now for quite some, this year especially. It's gotten more rabid. What you see is that a lot of these individuals appear to believe that it is a form of free speech to deny others their right to speak freely, to basically just block them out, make it impossible for others to hear them. That it's a form of free expression to prevent other people from free movement. We've had cases where they formed like human chains, human fences, so to speak, blocked students from going to class. Now, if I'm paying 15 grand a year or something in tuition to go to class, and somebody's trying to block me from class, I'm going to start battering my way through them. And if they start punching back, I'm going to take names and sue the shit out of them. I'm going to say, I'm paying to go here. I don't have to respect your fucking human arm chain or whatever the fuck you're building here. Let me go to class. You do whatever the fuck you want. I don't give a fuck. The same is true of like the social justice warrior stuff. If a student wants to hear a speech being given by someone like this, and Milo, he's not even remotely far out there on the alt-right or anything. He's more of a traditional, not a neocon, but more of a traditional conservative. He's not, Sieg Heiling Hitler every day or anything like that. He's fairly mild compared to a lot of these people, really, when you think about it. If you feel triggered by that, if you don't like that, don't go and hear him speak. It's as simple as that. You hold a protest outside, but if you come on in, sit down, take a seat, and start listening to the speech, and then make it impossible for people to hear, number one, you're being an asshole. People aren't going to respond very positively to that because a lot of the people there are interested in hearing what the other person has to say. They didn't come there and get a ticket to hear you speak about your bullshit. Hold your own rally, make your own speech about stuff if you want to, see if people will listen to it. I guarantee if somebody like this is speaking, it's going to be so incoherent, the average person could be like, what the fuck's going on here? Is this even a human language? Is this even recognized as a form of communication, or is it just like a bunch of ape-like gibberish or something like that? You go there, and you start raising hell. First, you'll be seen as an asshole. Secondly, you're infringing upon his right to speak freely. He has every right to speak there as well. He was invited there by the university. The people there, they're not raising a fuss. They're not trying to drown him out or anything like that. Can you imagine the absolute uproar among sort of the social justice warrior folks? Let's say that someone like Anita Sarkeesian was on a college campus and there were a bunch of people like trying to drown her out and chant and so forth. They'd go crazy. They'd be crying tears everywhere. They'd be hyperventilating. They'd be so triggered they'd be having massive panic attacks. They'd be demanding the university kick everybody out. And yet something like this happens, the shoe is on the other foot, and people act like there's no big problem. Now online, of course, we generally, the people who are involved with the online world tend not to take too kindly to censorship. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, a lot of us have been banned from sites before, or been censored before, or felt we had been censored before, whether it's by a foreign government, some website, some fucking retarded forum administrator or something. It doesn't really matter whether you're left, right, center. Ultimately, at the end of the day, at some point, someone gets into a shouting match and somebody ends up getting sent to the ban bin or something like that. So we can satirize it on here. Unfortunately, what you've got on certain campuses is you have these movements of people who, to me, this sort of behavior, this sort of feigned outrage at other people having opinions other than your own sounds an awful lot, and I keep dragging this correlation in, to a bunch of evangelical Christians 20 or 30 years ago who couldn't stand the concept that someone would not believe in God or be gay or something like that. It sounds exactly the same to me. They use the same hollow emotional arguments that are utterly devoid of reason. They use the same hollow emotional appeals to try to whip others around them into a frenzy. They use the same dishonest tactics. They're disruptive, they're violent, they're stupid. They often look like there's something physically wrong with them. And that's, by the way, if you look at some retarded evangelical like Ted Cruz, who looks like he was the result of first cousin incest, and you compare that to some social justice warrior with their just generally hideous composure to them, and it always invariably seems to be that they're hideous physically individuals that are sickly. There's something like physically wrong with them in some way. Maybe it's all the fluoride they've been imbibing. I don't know. There's something wrong with them. They look a lot similar, let's face it, at the end of the day. Some buttery cowboy wannabe like Ted Cruz looks a lot like Trigglypuff, to me anyway, and their actions and their stupid emotional appeals are similar as well. I would say I don't stand for any form of censorship. As far as being tolerant, I don't have to pretend to like other people's views. If I consider them to be completely opposite my own, I'm going to freely debate them. But at the end of the day, I really don't care if they express those views. And I think this sets apart those that have a working mind, those who are capable of comprehending that others would come to conclusions other than their own on whether it's a major issue or a minor issue, and those like, again, the social justice warriors, the third waivers and the fat acceptance crowd and all the Tumblrites of the world, those people, and those on the other side supposedly, which act very similar, like, again, the most hardcore of evangelicals, some group of skinheads or something, that they can't, not only can they not tolerate views other than their own, they can't even comprehend, they can't wrap their heads around, they don't have the mental processing capable to wrap their heads around why somebody would come to a conclusion other than their own based on some form of reasoning. They act similarly, they speak similarly, they've come to similar conclusions. Both try to censor, both try to suppress, they try to impede other people. It's like with these protests we saw that I spoke of in Costa Mesa in California. People who believe that blocking traffic and burning cop cars and smashing out storefront windows is a form of free expression. It's not. That's not what was intended originally by our founders. You have the right to speak. So does Trump. So does this Trigglypuff person. If they're not impeding others from speaking, it's all good. There's no such thing as hate speech. It doesn't even exist. Someone saying faggot and saying they hate gay people, there's no such thing as hate speech. Yeah, you can say that that's vile, you can say that that's wrong, and it's an outdated ideology from the Neanderthal era, but they still have the right to say that, just as this person has every right to say that these people speaking that she happens not to agree with, that they're Nazis, that they're bigots, that they're evil, that there's something deeply disturbed about their mentality, and that they should just stay to home and shut up. She can say that all she wants, but at the same time, when she begins impeding their right to speak similarly, as she obviously thinks is her right at a public venue here, that's when it crosses a boundary. That's when it crosses a line. It becomes different. By the way, I would point out, on a similar token, I would apply this even to the whole corporations or people idea. Well, if that's true, then I have every right to go into any corporation and speak my mind. They might not choose to respect it. Unfortunately, our laws haven't caught up quite yet on that token. As far as social justice warriors go, though, clearly, you have the right to speak your mind. This person has a right to speak her mind, but she doesn't have the right to prevent others from speaking theirs. And I think there are people who, for some weird mental reason, they can't understand how this actually operates. They think that, well, this form of speech is evil, objectively wrong, and therefore it's free speech doesn't apply to it. Well, you can make that subjective observation about what she's saying. You can make that about anyone. You can say that it's an evil statement to say grass is green, and thus anyone saying that they don't deserve the right to say anything at all. It's evil, it's satanic or something like that. But that doesn't mean that's an objective understanding of the world. It's your subjective opinion. The social justice warrior has made the same mistake the evangelical did 30 years ago in becoming fanatic and trying to conflate meaningful objective discourse with subjective opinions that are framed as though they're objective. There's a big difference between the two. The claim of objectivity does not indicate objectivity. It merely indicates the claim has been made. But nobody else is under any onus to actually take that seriously, and that's what these people don't quite comprehend. So yeah, I thought this was funny. I mean, they've made all sorts of... They had a Numa Numa remix, which is really funny. Even the original video. It's just hilarious to watch her gyrating around. I mean, her fat's like rippling off her body and shit, and she's just ranting about hate speech and stuff. She's sitting there having a mental breakdown practically over things that the average person would say, oh, maybe a little bit off, if somebody's like center left or something, but they're not. It's hardly... Milo's hardly the next Hitler or something like that. So I thought it was very funny. The triggering at UMass it's full of laughs for all. Even most social justice warriors. You gotta come on. Even if you're like the pink hair wearing, empty rim glasses wearing, like third waiver / obesity acceptance movement land whale or something, you've got to admit this is a little bit fucking funny to watch this behavior. I mean, it's petulant behavior. It's like the sort of thing you would expect from a first grader who doesn't understand the finer points of debate, who just gets emotionally involved to the point at which they break down in tears when it's like, give me ice cream. Well, no, you can't have ice cream. I want ice cream. And they throw a tantrum. They throw themselves on the floor and pound their fists and cry and whine and wail and talk about how evil you are. You're the next Hitler because they didn't get ice cream. It looks exactly the same to me. It's very similar behavior. I've seen this on the right for years, but I mean, seeing it from the left is a relatively new thing. It's like the post-Obama era. Obama is like this dystopian, weird fucking figure, and the fact that he happens to have more melanin in his skin, I guess these people think it excuses their weird behavior, to the point where even Obama himself had to come out and say, some of this stuff is a little bit weird some months ago. I can't remember which group he was addressing. I can't remember, but he came out and said basically it's a little bit, to college students, essentially, these so-called activists on these campuses, your right to free speech can't be used to impede upon others. And that's quite something for Obama, because normally he doesn't believe in freedom at all. When you push Obama to that point where he has to tell the left to calm down, you know that there's a fucking issue. So yeah, there's my thoughts about it. I mean, thought it was fucking hilarious. That's about all. Peace out.